Hey all, here are OS Reviews. Today we're taking a closer look at the Vucatimes Vucabook 14. This is a 14-inch affordable laptop that sells for under $300, sometimes goes on sale for less than that, and comes in pretty interesting colors. More importantly, has a few unique features that I haven't seen in other laptops at this price range, including a trackpad that doubles as a numpad. So we can see digits printed on it that you can use to do quick calculations or Excel data entry more easily. And because it is still a 14-inch laptop, of course, it's pretty compact, so they don't have this room for a dedicated numpad on the side, so they shifted it onto the touchpad. And obviously you can turn this mode on or off, so it's a pretty clever design there. It also has a privacy slider for the webcam. Should be a decent enough Chromebook alternative, kind of a device for web browsing and light usage. In particular, the specs are also pretty competitive at this price, I'd say, better than some of the other laptops I've seen in the past. For one, it has a 14-inch IPS Full HD display, so it's 1080p instead of only 720p. In addition, it has 6 GB of built-in DDR4 RAM. There's 128 gigs of built-in SSD, which is pretty typical and standard these days. Expandable M2 SATA slot. The processor is also a little bit better than what we tend to see for this price range. It uses a quad-core Intel Celeron J3455, which is a little bit unusual to see. It's clocked up to 2.3 gigahertz, and most other laptops in this price will use a Celeron N3350, which in terms of benchmark scores is actually around 1,000 points lower, performance being a little bit higher than the really entry-level Celerons and Intel Atoms that we used to see. So this one here will be a bit faster, and you can feel that performance difference as you're using it. It's a fanless machine, so it should also be more energy efficient than a full i3 chip. So inside here we have the quick kind of user manual. Along with the laptop itself, of course, we have this blue edition, which again sets it apart from the typical black or white that we often see. Also comes in a pink color, so lots of neat customization here for the color scheme. And we also have the charging adapter, which is pretty compact and easy to take with you, but it is using a kind of round plug, a barrel plug, instead of, say, USB Type-C. A closer look at the design of the laptop, it does have very sharp kind of angular corners, which actually make it look pretty distinctive and more expensive than the budget price would imply. Although it's constructed out of a polycarbonate plastic, it's matte, doesn't attract too much fingerprints, and doesn't have too much flex or bend to it. Actually feels very rigid. The corners and angles also make it look a bit more slim as well, and overall it's pretty lightweight. It's under 3 pounds. On the right-hand spine, we have access to a USB 3.0 port. We also have a standard 3.5mm headphone jack, a micro SD card slot for reading back some additional files and content, and on the right-hand side, we have the charging port, another USB 3.0 port, and there's a micro HDMI port for video out. Would have wished to see a full-sized HDMI, but overall, it is what it is. Now, on the very back of the laptop is where we have some soft touch rubber feet, preventing it from sliding around on a surface or a desk. However, unlike some of the other models we've checked out recently, in order to upgrade the aforementioned SATA SSD, you have to remove all the screws to pry off the entire back instead of a small caddy door that some of the other designs we've seen. The hinge also opens up. It's pretty stiff, and the one-piece design, similar to MacBooks, is quite sturdy. The keyboard is using a typical island or chiclet layout, and it feels pretty good in terms of the overall responsiveness. The keycaps have a decent stabilization, so it doesn't feel too cheap or hollow. As you're typing down, all the keys feel pretty consistent. We also have a speaker bar that has a left and right side speakers, along with some LED indication lights. And down below here we have the trackpad, which is also pretty generous in terms of the size. And we see the aforementioned numpad mode that you can access essentially by tapping on this one dot, and then swiping downwards like this using this gesture will activate the trackpad and turn off the cursor mode. You can also put your finger and swipe up to access it and use it as a traditional mouse pad. So that's how you switch between the two different modes, and the overall responsiveness feels quite good. It clicks very well. Finally, on the top here, we have the aforementioned 14-inch display, which is matte. So unlike a glossy or a glass covering, it doesn't attract as much light or reflections, making it a little easier to see even if you're outdoors. So visibility and viewing angles are very good. Overall, it's quite modern looking and still a very compact build for a 14-inch laptop. This strikes a good balance between something that you can get some work done with, but at the same time still is easy enough to put into a backpack. Here's a quick size comparison. The last 14-inch laptop we reviewed was from Gateway. This was their 14 Ultra Slim series, and honestly they're quite similar, except the Gateway does have a spinning fan, so it's not a silent computer, and the Gateway is a little bit heavier. Alternatively, here it is against a smaller laptop that has a 12.5-inch display, which you can see is going to be a bit more compact. So this sits somewhere in between. Overall, because it is using an SSD, first of all, the boot up times are very fast. Typically, a cold boot from completely turned off to on takes less than 10 to 15 seconds. Moving on to system performance, we have a very stock install of Windows 10 without any really bloatware on here. In fact, even the built-in Office tools like Word, PowerPoint, Excel currently is just a trial version that will expire after a month, just like other laptops these days. You can purchase a license if you want to use them for real, or you can use OpenOffice or Google Docs. In terms of the system properties, out of the 128 gig SSD, we have about 92 gigabytes remaining, and definitely better than, say, 64 gigs, which used to be the norm just a year or two ago on $200 laptops. So that's at least an improvement, and you can also, again, increase the SSD storage with the SATA slot, or you can also pop in a micro SD card and supplement it with additional flash storage. As far as the system properties are concerned, we can verify that indeed it is using the aforementioned Intel Celeron J355. The base clock speed, by the way, is 1.5 gigahertz, but under the turbo mode, it does go as fast as, again, 2.3 gigahertz. You can also tap on the battery icon to change the performance mode, so you can actually slide it to be the battery saving mode all the way up to the highest performance mode. We have 6 gigabytes of built-in DDR4 RAM, a step up from the base configurations of many of its competitors, which still offer only 4 gigabytes. Speaking of the battery life, overall I was able to get around 6 hours of usage out of this under kind of moderate performance mode and about 50% screen brightness, so it can definitely last me through about a day's use before I needed to plug it in, even though it's not an endurance king compared to some Chromebooks. Otherwise, again, the trackpad is pretty responsive, and overall I didn't have any issues in terms of using it for gestures and navigation. Things like pinch to zoom multi-touch is also very smooth and responsive, as you can see there. Do a quick demo of the aforementioned numpad, since it really is one of the special features. We can tap on any of the points to very quickly do computations and enter numbers, and does also have other operation signs like plus, minus, a multiply and divide, as well as an enter key built on in as well. So again, all of these things is a little bit faster than pecking and hunting with a cursor. So the kind of implementation here of just swiping to activate it or go back into the cursor mode is actually, again, working pretty well. And it's not too easy to accidentally trigger into a mode by accident. It's just because you tend to use the touchpad like this if you think about it. So rest assured that in regular usage, it won't just kind of randomly flick back and forth between the modes. Moving into a discussion on the performance in terms of the pass mark score, as aforementioned, the chipset here, which is the Celeron J3455, gets 2,254. So that's going to be decent in terms of, again, system navigation. Also helps with the SSD, and 6 gigs of RAM still feels pretty snappy without too much delays or slowdowns as you're just doing these basic tasks. And compared to the much more popular Intel Celeron N3350, has a CPU passmark score of 1,135. So the J3455 that's used here is almost 1,000 points higher. It's almost twice as fast. And it definitely is a difference that you can feel. And finally, compared to something like an Intel Atom X5 chip, which is found on other products like Chewy's HeroBook, for instance, selling for around the same price, is about 1,000. Antenna reception is also quite strong and stable. As you can see here, it gets almost full bars, even though we're a little bit further away from the router right now, thanks to that dual band AC, as well as the plastic construction allows the antenna to pass through pretty well. So loading speeds here are very good. Overall, the entire page loads pretty consistently, and scrolling is also quite fast. It's not instant in terms of everything loading all at once, but it honestly is good enough. You won't really feel annoyed by using this browser. It's definitely faster than some of the entry-level Chromebooks I've even tried. Again, the 6 gigs of RAM does allow you to open up a few more tabs. You can jump back and forth between these previously open applications and tabs, and they're still retained without refreshing itself, compared to 4 gigs of RAM, which typically can only hold up to about 5 browser tabs. On this, you're able to get around 10 to 15 before it starts to slow down a little bit more. So definitely gives you a bit more versatility. Now we can take a quick look at the speaker quality next. Right, so kind of turning the volume down. Takeaway is the speaker quality is average. I wouldn't say it's exceptional. It could definitely be a little bit louder, but at the same time doesn't really distort too much and has relatively clean and crisp mids and trebles. Not a lot of bass as expected, but overall passable for watching videos with. Does have pretty decent separation of the left and right sides, so if you're watching a film, you can kind of hear objects moving across the screen, but again, not exceptional, on par with other lower cost laptops we've checked out in the past. At least it's on the top and not kind of facing on the base or rear where it would be easier to cover up. With that being said, again, the display quality is very good for this price and doesn't have too much reflections, making it very easy to see. And again, colors are quite good in terms of an IPS panel, and you can definitely use it to enjoy it watching videos with without any problems. Loading back videos up to full HD resolution doesn't pose a problem. I can scrub between different parts of the clip, and it still remains a pretty snappy experience. So in terms of using this again for watching YouTube, for Netflix, it's a pretty enjoyable experience overall. Now kind of exiting out of this, again the performance for web browsing, not too problematic. We can check out some other use cases for the average user that wants to do just some web browsing, get some productivity done in terms of some Word, Excel, and PowerPoint editing. It will definitely get you by. It's responsive enough to do some kind of office work as well as school work without feeling burdened. And again, it has a very good sized keyboard. It doesn't feel cramped at all because of the 14-inch size, takes good advantage of the width, and feels very tactile and responsive as you're typing along. Again, not too much lag as you're inputting words and text. Even on longer documents, you can scroll back and forth, make these quick changes, and things don't take, that much time. Because it is a fanless machine, it's of course silent during operation, so it doesn't provide any noise in the background, which is great, and also doesn't draw as much power. When you are putting on your lap, I will say that the left edge of the computer does get slightly warm, however it never thermo-throttles, it never gets too hot or uncomfortable. One of the benefits of using a full-blown Windows 10 computer compared to say Chromebook is you are getting a real desktop class OS that supports all the legacy apps that you may want to install, for instance Adobe Photoshop, or just something like drivers in general that you may come across. Any executables, exe files on the web can be downloaded and run without any problems, compared to the much more limited Chromebooks, which is essentially a browser and some mobile apps. At the same time, of course, Microsoft does give you the Microsoft Store, so you can still find a fair selection of lighter, more mobile optimized titles, things like games, as well as things like more optimized versions of media applications can be installed, and these can all be run without any issues. Things like getting some, again, work done as far as photo editing and some light video editing, it's also possible. However, it's by no means a creator series laptop. It's by no means kind of a powerhouse in this sense. Even though it has 6 gigs of RAM, which is okay, again, the processor is still not going to be the most optimal as far as performance is concerned. It still has more of a battery conscious design to it. So if you're doing things like editing a 5-minute video clip in full HD, it took me about 15 to 20 minutes to export. So that's going to be a bit longer compared to a full regular Core i3 processor, for instance. As far as gaming is concerned, again, this is not really a gaming laptop. It's more meant for regular quick usage, web browsing, entertainment, and some light office work, but simpler titles will still run. Things like Minecraft with more complex or AAA titles, you probably have to be a bit more cautious there. It will technically load, but you'll get a more choppier experience. since again, this is really an energy efficient laptop at the end of the day. However, I will say that in the advent of cloud gaming, if you are subscribed to services like Strata or Microsoft's xCloud, for instance, which is basically using the computer as just a terminal, as long as you're connected to the internet, you're using Microsoft's servers and their cloud engines to provide the power for the games. This is just your monitor. Then of course you don't really need the most horsepower in the physical device in front of you. As long as you have a good internet connection, you can use those cloud gaming platforms, and that's another alternative to consider. But the same goes really with any computer in that case. So there we have it. That's been our closer look at the Vucatimes Vucabook 14, a 14-inch affordable laptop that again sells for under $300 and has a few distinctive elements. It's like this double numpad / trackpad setup that actually works pretty well, very clever, a privacy shield for the webcam, which I really like, as well as a decent construction quality. It doesn't feel too cheap for a plastic build, as well as a interesting color scheme, a decent value, I'd say. Now, of course, recently we did review the Gateway 14-inch laptop, which is a Walmart exclusive, and between the two, I would say that there's kind of pros and cons. The Gateway does have a faster processor, but it's also a bit more expensive, typically around $100 more, and for that money you'll be getting a faster CPU. However, you are also getting less RAM, only 4 gigs in the Gateway versus 6 on this, as well as this having a few, again, additional hardware functions. So what it boils down to is if you're looking to save even more money, this one here again, which is $100 less, I would say is a really good baseline ultra budget laptop to take a closer look at if all you need it is for basic tasks, and it can handle those things actually surprisingly well in terms of the boot up times, the daily operation still feeling pretty smooth. So if you're interested, you can check out more details in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the pretty interesting Vucatimes Vucabook 14-inch laptop.